We're back here again, looking back at the year that was in government purchasing 2020. What a year it was, right? And we're also going to have some predictions for the year ahead, looking at 2021. I'm Bill Culhane, the VP of Operations here at BidPrime. Stephen Hetzel is here with us. Stephen is co-founder and COO at BidPrime. And Stephen, I think I might have lost count, but I think this is the fifth year in a row that you and I have sat down and gone through this information.
The fifth time, yep, and except this is the only time we're not in the same room together. Hopefully
Yeah,
next
we are.
year.
Yeah, we are safely social distancing. And so, like I said a moment ago, we are going to, in a moment, take a look back. Stephen, it was about 12 months ago, looked at 2020, and then, of course, 2 or 3 months later, the global pandemic hit, and that changed many things, not just for businesses, but also for government as well. And before Stephen and I get started, we do want to acknowledge, and Stephen and I, on behalf of everybody at BidPrime, we salute certainly a tip of the cap to all of the essential workers out there, everyone in healthcare, in government, scientists, education, across the board. And Stephen, you and I know, as we've looked at our clients here at BidPrime, so many businesses were able to pivot and maybe change what they're manufacturing, what they're providing to help in the efforts to battle COVID-19. I was really impressed by the way that people stepped up.
Right, and we had a lot of vendors that reached out to us who actually wanted to, change their keywords, incorporate new categories as they pivoted into responding to the pandemic.
And one topic, of course, that came up, and it was something that we frankly here at BidPrime have looked at over the years. Business continuity became such a buzzword as we move through the year 2020. Again, public sector and private sector alike, many had to implement their business continuity plans. What took place at BidPrime that allowed BidPrime to just continue onwards as best as possible?
We were pretty fortunate actually, because we've already, again, in 2009 we started with a hybrid virtual model already, and many of our staff already worked from home maybe 2 or 3 days of the week or 4 days a week.
One thing that BidPrime did as well, Stephen, and I promise everybody we're going to get to the look back and the predictions ahead in a moment. But one thing that BidPrime did as well is develop, implement, and make available a variety of different Bid RFP hubs. There was the COVID hub that was initially launched, I guess it was back in the April, May timeframe, and then Set Asides hub, which are bids and RFPs that are targeted towards businesses with special designations, and also a cybersecurity hub. But I want to ask in particular about the emergence of that COVID hub. What was the reasoning behind that, and what did it provide for businesses?
Things were changing very quickly, and state and local governments had to respond to the need for PPE, hand sanitizer, face masks. We created these hubs to where the links to the bids and everything that was aggregated in the last week or two of bids for certain industries were provided completely for free to all vendors.
Stephen, as you and I have done these videos over the years, I've always joked with you, and maybe it's turned into an old joke because I use it all the time. As we wrap up these videos, I always say, hey, Stephen, I'm not going to hold you, we're not going to hold you to any of these predictions. Well, when you and I did the most recent version of this video, it was in January of 2020. And who knew that 2 months, 3 months later, things would change dramatically? That being said, and I've got the list here, I've got my notes. So 12 months ago, moving into 2020, you talked about election services growing in 2020, 5G. You were also looking forward to the advancement of various forms of automation. You predicted a rise in VR, virtual reality, and simulation. Cybersecurity has been big. I guess that's an easy one, easy for me to say, but cybersecurity has been around forever. Social engineering, wind turbines, renewable energy, and cloud. Again, things changed not too long into 2020, but as you do look back at the year that was, what did you observe?
Saw really nothing done on infrastructure itself, but it seems that with virtual infrastructure, the Band-Aid was kind of ripped off and we were forced to make some changes. So maybe that'll accelerate more in the coming year as they make more strategic determinations on which direction to go with virtualization. As far as automation and drones, I think a lot of the big picture changes that we were anticipating seeing, especially in the state and local side, didn't really come to fruition. But I mean, I have an excuse, I guess. If there's any year for one, we have 2020 as an excuse to be a little off.
Yeah, no doubt. So enough of 2020.
Yeah.
Let's look ahead. You have been, most recently, you've been on a number of platforms. I've seen a number of reports. I keep an eye on you, but you've been out there publicly talking about the recovery stages, is how you described it. So looking at 2021, let's start with the recovery stages. What are they? What all's involved? And as you do look ahead, what industries do you see in the coming year that'll have a lot of growth based on investment being spurred on by government, public sector, RFPs, bids, contracts?
Well, I think the first part of the recovery stage was just completed, which was just an extension of the original CARES Act, the COVID Recovery Act, which mainly is meant to stem the flow of existing losses, provide support services for individuals and companies that were impacted by COVID, and also responding to some of the needs to roll out the vaccine and all that. As state and local governments have had a shortfall in many of their budgets, and that's due to decreased fees, taxes, ridership, on mass transit, and they're still paying a lot of employees, but they're not actually fulfilling services, and there's a lot of backlogged work. So they're probably the first in line to get bailed out by the federal government, meaning they're going to get funds, and those funds will have certain strings attached to provide, I guess, a recovery, but also an investment into a stimulus going into 2021 and after. After, we talked about PPE, hand sanitizer, vaccine rollout, freezers, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the stuff that is right here in the now. But where we see a lot of investment going in this next year or two is going to be in renewable energy, waste to energy, a lot of the green technology, mass transit projects, fuel technology and fuel innovations, battery storage, for example. A lot of this it sounds like a repeat of 2009, except it's what hit us in 2009 pales in comparison to what we've gone through this last year as an economy, as a country. So I think it's going to be bigger than what the 2009 ARRA, the Recovery Act, was in many of the same industries, the same fields, except technology has come a long way since then. And so I could see a lot of modernization in smart cities, grid modernization, power, energy, again, waste, recycling. There's going to be a lot of talk about that in the next year.
One question that I've received, Stephen, and I know our folks here at BidPrime from time to time will have clients or prospects or whomever reach out, understanding that we have our fingers on the pulse of what's going on in government purchasing. But a lot of folks have asked about those contracts a year ago, back in 2020, that were canceled or delayed. Do you see a number of those contracts being resurrected here in 2021?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of we're a data company, so we look at the number of bids year over year, and it's my mission to make sure that we capture more bids to make sure we have total coverage of the state and local market. We saw a drop in the number of bids, and starting at the end of March into April and May, and really throughout the year, where it was the first year where we ever saw a reduction in the number of opportunity solicitations posted by governments. A lot of those were replaced by emergency buys, but a lot of those were just stalled, delayed. They weren't thinking about big picture changes. They weren't investing in the future. They were just trying to respond and react in the time that was. So I think we're going to see a resurgence of that in 2021, in addition to the funding that will be coming out there. I mean, I'm almost certain that there will be some sort of state and local bailout with a lot of dollars attached to it from the federal government. And I think we'll see a resurgence in the number of solicitations in 2021 that will make up for a lot of what was missed in the last year.
You mentioned emergency purchases, and we've mentioned PPE a number of times during our conversation. As you know, my wife Tracy is an ICU nurse here in Austin, and she and I, of course, we talk about COVID a lot because she's boots on the ground here. She and her team have been dealing with this going back to the start in March. And as she and I have spoken, we've talked about the vaccine. It's being rolled out here in Austin, and I know elsewhere across the country as well. And I asked Tracy, I said, okay, with the vaccine being in place now and being administered, is the demand for PPE going to go down at some point in 2021? It's her opinion, and again, she's a veteran critical care nurse. In her opinion, it is going to go beyond 2021. But you, as an industry analyst, what do you see ahead for PPE, things like masks, gowns, sanitizer, etc.?
I agree with her. I mean, even if the threat from COVID is reduced, I do think after a year of this, it's part of our consciousness. Social distancing isn't going away overnight. Like it or not, it's just there's going to be a long-term impact, and there will be touchless hand sanitizer at every entrance everywhere going forward, and including, little stickers on the floor that remind us to stay 6 feet away from each other, plexiglass. I don't see that going anywhere in the near future.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, Stephen, we're going to wrap things up, but before we exit stage left, I do want to ask on behalf of our audience for an update. I mentioned on a show that you and I were on, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, that you and I have known each other for a while, and you've always impressed me as being somebody who is an advocate for transparency, for openness in government, for the sharing of information, for competition. And most watching this video are aware of BidPrime's lawsuit against DemandStar. What's the latest?
We expect to hear some news soon, but just to remind everybody that Ramsey County is a county in Minnesota. They had a contract with DemandStar through a Wisconsin purchasing agreement to provide bid documents to suppliers. And so the recap of it is we sought that information from Ramsey County. Ramsey County told us to go to DemandStar. We downloaded the bid documents. DemandStar canceled our registration. We go back to Ramsey County, and it's just been this runaround. Every time we go back to DemandStar, we just get stalled, delayed. That we'd get told that they were reevaluating their business model, or that COVID was a reason that they weren't able to provide bid documents. It just got sillier and sillier, the excuses that they were coming up with just to not provide those bid documents to us and to our customers, which is a pretty large network of suppliers out there. So good news is we have secured an agreement with Ramsey County to provide those documents in the meantime, and we're hopeful that Ramsey County will seek another e-procurement solution that will actually kind of encourage fairness and transparency of access to those bid documents without charging fees or collecting things that just were let's just say illegitimate at the least. So that's where we're at right now. We're hopeful to see some news in the near future to confirm and that we can get those fees back for the many vendors who have spent money in the past 6 years and spent $5. Those add up over time, and you see these creepy $5 fees, just like these people that have complained about it since I started in this industry, since 2009. So I'm hopeful that we can get some news for vendors on that front to see if we can get their money back.
And as a reminder, Stephen, something you and I spoke about earlier, how much is BidPrime charging vendors and contractors for access to the COVID hub, to the set-asides hub, to the cybersecurity hub?
It's completely free, and we don't charge $5. We don't charge any fees at all. There's no strings attached. If you want to sign up and get notifications in advance and get all of the great things that BidPrime has, including the account management, the customer service, the FOIA research that we do, that obviously has a cost. There's a lot of human capital that gets put into that. But as far as getting links and getting the core data, that's free.
And that's quite a contrast as well. And by the way, just to put kind of a date stamp on this conversation, Steve and I are sitting down on January 4th, 2021, just in the event that somebody is watching this video in the future and they're trying to match up information updates that are available. Well, yeah. Stephen, that's going to do it. Again, this is a little different with you and I doing the Zoom social distancing method. Hopefully, and my fingers are crossed, hopefully next year when you and I do this look back, look ahead, you and I will be sitting kind of side by side in a studio somewhere.
Like old times, yeah.
Like the old times. Well, on behalf of everybody at BidPrime, all the best to you and your business.